Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope my look today is giving off night court vibes and not lady of the night vibes, although they're really one and the same. I had just finished, freshly finished, A Court of Wing and Ruin. It's kind of unclear, it's a little confusing, but this feels like the final book in a trilogy. It sounds like more books are going to be made that will include the same characters and the same universe, but for this story, for this arc, this is the final book. I have a ton of thoughts. This is gonna have a lot of spoilers, so let's get started. So I listened to this over audiobook, which is how I've been able to go through these massive books so quickly. And the first thing I noticed was that they changed narrators from the previous two books to this one. And I have to say, I like this one more. And I liked the previous one too. I think she did a really good job. I had no issues with her until I heard this new one, and she just had more pep in her step when it came to reading. I felt like Farah's, even her inner thoughts and just the way she talked just had a lot more energy to it, but she still matched the style and the tone of how everyone else talked in the previous few books. So it was pretty seamless and it was good. And if you've seen my previous reviews on the last two books in this series, I will link them down below. I absolutely adored A Court of Mist and Fury. Is that what it was? Whatever the second book was, I loved that book. It is quickly become one of my favorite books of all time. It is just so ridiculously fun, and I would highly recommend this series to anyone just so they can get to that second book. So that being said, this third book I don't think was as good as the second one. To me, overall, really strong beginning, really strong ending. Had a little bit of a boring middle problem, which is a shame because that's what the second one was able to overcome. Its middle was just so fun. And this one was got a little bit monotonous, a little bit dull, and we'll get into that. But overall, still really enjoyed the book. I love this series. Now that it's all done, I can finally safely look at fan art and read some theories and such, and just getting into more fandom stuff has been really fun for me. I'll just kind of start at the beginning and then talk about it as we go. The first third of this book, when Farah is in the spring court with Tamlin, and that was so fun. That was so fun. I've said in previous reviews that I'm not the biggest fan of stories told in first person, but this again shows how Sarah J. Maas is justifying this first person point of view, because the fact that we can get an intimate look at Farah's thoughts and how she's planning and calculating and what she really means when she does something, and really see how she is being two-faced and how she's being a spy for the night court and the spring court. That is so cool, and it was so fun. And I loved seeing Lucian again, and that Lucian kind of has his own had his own motives, because he found out he was mated with Elaine and wants to get close to Farah to get close to Elaine. Great. So the fact that we got to spend more time with him brought me a lot of joy. I think my favorite part in that whole spring court was when Farah pulled one over on the high priestess during that spring ceremony, and the light landed on her instead of the high priestess, and she started glowing and acting like she didn't know what was happening, and everybody thought she was kind of saintly. That was just that was so cool. No, this high priestess lady is trash and a terrible person, and so when Farah is in her mind controlling her and getting the high priestess, I can't remember her name, that's why I keep calling her by her title, smash her own hand with a rock. That is really brutal, but what Farah kept saying was a little on the nose. It was a weird lesson to the audience about consent, because the High Priestess has been shown to make these moves on men and kind of force them to do sexual things for her, and it's gross and it's bad. And it just felt like my high school principal was talking to me about consent, just like, and you will never touch another person unless they want it and initiate it first. Okay, teacher Farah. Like, the sentiment isn't bad and you get why they're doing it. The dialogue just felt off. And there's other moments like this throughout the book too, and we will get to them. I loved the sequence when Farah and Lucian escape from the spring court and they're running through the autumn court and then end up and they're like freezing, and then they have to run away from Lucian's brothers and they're on this lake of ice. I don't know, actually I do know why. I was walking Yukon at the time and there was a cold spell coming through, so it was cold and the book was saying Farah was cold and I just like really felt everything she was going through with that fight. That fight was just really good. I was anxious and freaked out, but also like into it. And just the catharsis of when Cassian and Azriel got there and like saved the day, and just this is the first time you're seeing them and their entrance is so dramatic, and it was just like, my boys are safe. But also, so we get back to the night court. Everything starts getting real exciting because it's like Lucian's there and Nesta and Elaine, who are now Fae, are there along with everybody else in the inner circle and Rhysand and all that. And it was just like, yes, just exactly what I wanted. All of the best people are together. The drama is going to get good. However, it was a little disappointing that we go through so much at the end of the second book, and like Cassian's wings get torn apart and Azriel is hurt, and the fact that those two, especially Cassian, recovered so quickly. And you know that Fae, especially High Fae, can recover from wounds really quickly. Like, that's established in the book. It just kind of retroactively made the ending in the second book not as powerful, because it's like, okay, well, they're completely fine. They don't have a limp. They're not held back in any way by what happened in Highburn with the king and the cauldron and all that. I mean, it's weird because I'm happy they're okay, but I'm also like, ooh, there should be consequences for your actions. Okay, also, Farah and Rhysand's sex scene was it was extremely obnoxious. Why, hello there. I just wanted to take a moment out of this video to let you guys know that thank you, Yukon. To let you guys know that you should check out the wonderful site Book Depository. It is a place where you can order books, including new releases, at discounted prices, and best part, free worldwide shipping. I will have some affiliate links below to all three of the Court of Thorns and Roses series, as well as to the site in general. I get a very small commission if you use those links, which I appreciate greatly. And thank you so much for your support. And back to the show. I think part of it is just that they're together. They're united, they're in love. All of that like peaked in the second book for me. So it just felt a little bit gratuitous to have this like really long over the top sex scene. It's like, I get it, they're together, they're in love, I'm happy for them, I'm rooting for them, I'm kind of over this. And luckily, if you're like a romance person, which I totally am, you get your whole fix, especially between Cassian and Nesta, who like, I love. Like, I really like Cassian. Like, I did in the second book, but now I'm like, oh, super into Cassian, and I'm very team Nesta, which is fun because the first book I kind of hated her. Not kind of, I did. She was horrible, she was rude, she was a bitch, and now like she's still all those things. She's a sensible person, and her and Cassian's little, like, they can, you know there's something there, no one will speak it out loud, they just can't get past each other's walls, and it's just so fun to read. And gosh darn, I really like Nesta. I feel like I relate to her in a way that's almost bad. She just really stood out against the rest of the cast, and I guess I'll just get into that now. Obviously, I love everyone in the inner circle, and they mean a lot to me, and they genuinely feel like my friends now. However, I think that's part of the thing that made the middle feel like it sagged a little bit, is that everyone kind of started to feel the same. Like, everyone in that inner circle is a superbly good person with tragic backstories, who love and care about each other, who are generally a little quippy or sarcastic, and they're all like that. And that's not to say their personalities don't feel different, because they do. For the most part, you could take a line out of context, not have the tag at the end of it, and I'd probably be able to guess who it was. Like, everybody definitely had distinct personalities. But I think it's just the fact that they're all, like, I know them all so well, and I know that they're being played as, like, these really, 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 really good people. Like, they're just angels. And yeah, they're sarcastic angels, and they have really tragic, sad, heroic backstories. But, like, I like the fire that someone like Nesta brings. She's just a bitch. She's a bitch throughout the entire book, and it's so refreshing. If I can get a little bit into the fact that this book could be called the reveals on reveals and reveals. Like, this book just had so many twists, really weird twists. So it's like, oh, Tamlin's a bad guy, but turns out he's a good guy, but turns out he's a bad guy, but turns out he's a good guy, at least towards Farah, and then it turns out he's actually just a good guy. That was a lot. Oh, and what's his name? Gregory George Jurian. That one I think was done a lot more successfully, where you think from the beginning, from the first book, that he's like this crazy human military man who's been cursed for 500 years and is like insane now. Turns out he's a good guy, and he's on the good guy's side, and he's just whispering sweet nothings into Hybern's ear. That was a better reveal, in my opinion. The Tamlin thing, I wasn't against it. It just also made Tamlin an interesting character to me, because I was like, I can't place what's going on with you, or where do your loyalties lie? And on one hand, I know you're kind of a jerk and you make bad decisions, but on the other hand, by the end of the book, I really, really liked Tamlin. Even when he came into that meeting in the day court, which that definitely like was the bump in the middle that made it from being completely like kind of boring. That day court meeting was awesome. Tamlin coming in there, and even though he was a prick, he also was just so fun. You need to have someone who's pushing against the main character and all her friends, because even though, yeah, sometimes they like quarrel, for the most part, they're all on the same side, they're all on the same team, they all deeply love each other because they talk about it all the damn time. But then like a Tamlin comes in and it just adds this ridiculous energy. You know what I really wanted that we just didn't get in this series, and I wish we did, was a confrontation just between Farah, Tamlin, and Rhysand, and like an honest one where they just hash everything out. We can have a good cry, we can have some fights, because like Tamlin's not a bad guy, and he kind of got screwed over. Like, he genuinely thought that he found the love of his life, and turns out that's not at all the case, and he thought he was the hero in the story. Turns out that's not at all the case. I don't know, I just ended up having a lot of sympathy for him, and he became immensely more interesting because he was like the adversary to the rest of the group, right? Oh, and I also kind of like how there was a teasing relationship between Nesta and Cassian, where they never quite say it and they're just always tiptoeing around each other. Also having that between Lucian and Elaine, although that, I don't know. That one's kind of sad and pitiful and weird, and Elaine's entire storyline just made me so sad. I was also sad when Lucian was sent off for basically the entire middle of the book. And I thought, I heard it wrong. I thought when they were like, oh, someone needs to go out and find this enchanted Firebird Queen and figure out either how to break the spell or bring her into the war, blah, blah, blah. Lucian said he was going. I also thought Farah said that she was going. So I was like, yeah, we're gonna go on another adventure. We're gonna go get this Firebird Queen. And then it turned out like it was just Lucian, and I was a little bit sad. I was like, oh, but I like when we go on adventures. That's what the second book did. That was so fun, as Farah would just go on all these weird, random mini adventures throughout the world. Okay, but day court meeting, all of them coming together. Day court sounds beautiful, and then I love seeing all the different High Lords and all their different courts. I love when stories have like groups that are set in like very specific locations, colorings, vibes. That's what I like about Avatar and the 4 like elemental nations, or Harry Potter and the different houses. So seeing all their High Lords come together, it was cool. Oh, one of my favorite parts in the book, although it's definitely not supposed to be, but it actually made me laugh out loud, was when the eldest son of the Autumn Court, who was supposed to marry Moore, but again, they're horrible people, but then you find out that maybe the eldest son is not as horrible as you previously thought, which I thought was really interesting, and we'll get to that. But he comes in and says something to Moore about like, you look as slutty as ever. And then Azriel like launches himself across the room to beat the shit out of him. Oh, Mr. Autumn Court, you shouldn't be saying that to young ladies, even though Moore does dress very slutty. And then Moore proceeds to, later that night, sleep with one of the High Lords. Like the High Lord, what was it, of Dawn? Okay, so you kind of are a slut? That whole thing with Moore is kind of unfortunate, because if it was done intentionally, then it would be really sad. Like, oh, Moore and Azriel like have this love towards each other that everybody can see, but they won't act on it, they won't speak on it. Azriel especially is just head over heels in love with Moore, and Moore sleeps around, and it like breaks Azriel's heart. I couldn't get a handle if the book wanted me to think that Moore's decisions of being kind of slutty were bad ones. Oh my god, this video is gonna be so long. Let's just get into Moore's reveal, because boy, did I not think it worked. Farah points out, Moore, you're breaking Azriel's heart. You're lying to everybody by pretending you're not into him. Shame on you, Moore. And then they're like mad at each other and won't talk to each other. And then Moore pulls Farah aside and it's like, listen, I'm not a bad person. I know how Azriel feels about me. I'm not doing this to break his heart. I'm doing this because I'm a lesbian. Huh? She then goes on to be like, oh, I'm a lesbian and I couldn't tell anybody because my family already hates me, and I didn't want to tell them because they would hate me anymore, and even when I left my family for the last 500 years, I didn't want to really reveal it to anybody because I wanted it to stay a secret in case it got back to my family, who I've already disowned and rarely ever see. And even though I know Azriel has been hiding from me for the last 500 years, I didn't want to tell him because I didn't want to hurt his feelings. And I still sleep around with guys sometimes to throw Azriel off my trail. 1, it has never been brought up that gayness in the fairy world was an issue, especially since in this book we meet two gay High Lords. Not saying that can't be the case, but throughout these long books that has never been brought up once. So her being like, oh, it's an issue. Girl, since when? Apparently nobody cares about like how you dress, how hypersexual you are, or anybody is. Like, this world is just hyper sexual. Everybody is very sex driven, wear very revealing outfits. Yeah, she kind of talks about like why her family hates people like that, and it kind of makes sense, like, oh, we want to continue the bloodline, blah blah blah. But it's like, okay, well, your family already hated you, disowned you, and then you left them, and you rarely have to see them or interact with them. And even when you do, you go out of your way to try to irritate them. But you're weirdly hiding the fact you're a lesbian from them because it, like, there was a reason, but it wasn't a very good one. It was like, oh, I'm just hiding it to hide it, to keep a part of me private. It's like, okay, well, one, I don't know why they would find out if you don't tell them. You never interact with them or this court to begin with. Two, you're like third in command to the High Lord, so like also they can't touch you, they can't do anything to you or like your reputation, which I don't think you care about anyway because you sleep around with so many people. Three, why wouldn't you tell Azriel? Why wouldn't you tell Azriel? Why wouldn't you tell Azriel? This poor man is wasting his time chasing after you, pining after you because he's in love with you, and you're not gonna tell him you're a lesbian? Azriel is a chill, good person. I feel like you would be like, hey Azriel, I love you too, but not like that because I'm a lesbian. And Azriel would be like, oh, okay, I understand. I'm disappointed, but I understand. Yeah, his heart would be broken, but if you're worried about him getting pissed, I feel like he'd be pissed because you wasted so much of his time. That is such a cruel thing to do to someone. That was supposed to be something, I think, for us to be sympathetic towards more. It made me really, really dislike her because it's like, girl, you're actively hurting one of your, like, family members, one of your best friends. And then Farrah too, Moore was like, you must think I'm a horrible person. And Farrah's just like, no. But it's like, what? Yeah, she is. Farrah, you need to talk some sense into her. What she's doing is fundamentally wrong. So that just kind of downgraded Moore's character in my mind. Definitely made me like her a lot less, even though I'm sure that was not the intended purpose of such a reveal. Just to skip ahead to the final battle. Very effective, very moving. I cried twice. But you could definitely feel some of the limitations of being stuck in Farrah's head, because when these big reveals and reveal keep happening, Draken and Miriam able to come in and save the day, and Lucian and the Firebird Lady, and then Farrah and her sister's father and his Amada are coming in all at the same time. Well, there was some backstory and build up in the previous books as well as this one. It did feel a little forced, especially when it's first revealed and it's like Farrah and Rhysand and Draken and Miriam, and they're all talking, and Draken is like having to give this 10-minute exposition and backstory and info dump about like where they've been and why they're here and how they were able to make it and how they ran into all of these people. Like, we're in the middle of a battle and we're hearing all this, and it's just coming to nearly a complete halt. Not the best. However, then there's moments between Nesta and Cassian and the King of Hybern and their battle and fight, and that was so moving and so sad, and that's when I first cried. It was genuinely very emotional, and I really, really liked it. And it just made me so sad because I was like under the impression that Cassian was gonna die, but then it turns out he doesn't die because no one in the series ever dies or anything bad happens to them ever. Like the thing with Amren and Farrah and the fact that they have all these otherworldly monsters fighting for them, that stuff is really cool and I thought worked really well. What was both sad and effective and not my favorite thing though was when Rhysand and Farrah have to put this broken cauldron back together and then Rhys ends up dying. But not really, because he comes back to life like 5 minutes later. Nothing about him has changed. Everything about him is fine. It's like Sarah J. Maas wants to have her cake and eat it too, where she has these really emotional character deaths, but not really, because they're fine. And everything's fine and everyone's happy and everything's cool. It just feels a little cheap to me. It kind of undermines whatever dramatic emotion you're trying to go for because no one's really dying. Okay. I kind of also thought, because Tamlin's the last person who comes and like gives Rysand a bit of life energy or whatever it is, I thought they were gonna go for like Tamlin needs to sacrifice himself entirely to save Rysand, and Tamlin would be like, I'll do it for you, Farah. I thought it was gonna go something along those lines. It didn't. It was much more subdued than that, which like, I just want something very dramatic and crazy to happen between Tamlin and Farah and Rysand, and something, I don't know what, but I want to see it happen. And then spending the ending, the whole family back together and kind of discussing new treaties between the Fae and human world, which kind of seems pointless. If you watched my book review on The Cruel Prince, which I will leave in the description box down below, I talk about this in that too, where like the Fae are so overpowered. Like, humans should be irrelevant. I mean, if Fae can live virtually forever, and they have magical powers, and they control your mind, and they can fly, or they can winnow, or they're just generally better in every way, like, yeah, humans kind of just seem like ants in comparison, and I don't understand why they're not enslaved. It's funny trying to watch these worlds meet, and I'm glad they don't spend too much time on that, because I think it would fall apart very quickly. Overall, it was a good old-fashioned happy ending, very sweet, very dramatic. Like I said, I cried. I was a little let down or confused by some things, but overall, man, I love this series. It is so good, and I would highly recommend it. My roommate slash best friend, I got her started on the audiobooks, and she'll come to me and be like, Tamlin's all right, but he does some weird stuff, and ooh, this Rysand character, I like him a lot. He seems really interesting. And I'm just like, I know things you don't know. So that's really fun, but it is kind of a weird sell. Like, hey, the first book virtually doesn't matter. It's the second book you gotta get to. But it's true. I'm probably gonna look for a Court of Frost and Starlight, which from my understanding is a bunch of little like novellas having to deal with some of the different characters in this world. It's gonna be kind of a connector between this trilogy and the next trilogy that's going to come out in 2020, I believe. But if you know more information about that, definitely leave it in the comments below. I would love to know. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and make sure to like this video. It really helps me out, and to subscribe. That helps me out the most. That way it also keeps you up to date with any new book reviews that I will be coming out with, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.